How do you pick up the pieces from pregnancy loss, multiple rounds of IVF that aren't successful, more losses, and the trauma that comes with every step of this journey? How do you find the motivation and the courage to keep going when you feel like you are just met with disappointment and heartbreak every single month? Well, today's guest explains exactly how she managed to do that. This is an incredible story that you won't want to miss. Welcome to Your Journey to Fertility. This is the podcast that blends both science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Here each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so you can stop stressing that you'll never have a baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And this episode that you're about to listen to is just an incredible conversation. I am speaking with fertility coach and breathwork and Reiki teacher, Karla Levit. She has a truly amazing story. After the loss of her daughter at 5.5 months pregnant, she then endured a 10-year battle with infertility and further losses. She found there was this big, significant gap between healing and medicine, and she's now made it her mission to help women discover their own healing potential. She wants to help others find emotional freedom and inner peace and just bring back this renewed sense of confidence that so many of us lose. Through this holistic approach that includes mindset coaching and meditation, visualization, and breathwork and Reiki, she guides women to reclaim their power and continue their fertility journey with hope and resilience. What I love most about Karla's work is her emphasis on showing women how truly powerful they are. Because this is not something that we're told on our fertility journey. It is all about what we're doing wrong or how we've left it too late or what medical procedure we might need. And in this conversation, we go deep into so many important topics. We talk about subconscious and energetic blocks to getting pregnant, getting into the true alignment of what we want and how we do that. We talk about surrender and how to get there. We talk about intuition and trauma and healing. This is a big conversation and I hope it speaks to you in some way. Here's Karla. Karla, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just thrilled to have you and to be able to speak about. We have some amazing topics that we are going to dive into today. We're going to see where the conversation leads us, but can we start by learning a little bit more about you and the work that you do?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I've been an admirer from far. I love how you bring these topics to light with some humor, some sarcasm,
We don't laugh or cry, right?
Yeah. And I think that's really good because we do need to laugh and cry and do all of that and feel safe to do it, right? With people who understand. So thank you. Yeah. So I spent about the last 20 years or so working in finance in New York City. And about a year and a half ago, I decided to jump into this passion project and work with women who are suffering through pregnancy loss and infertility. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because I'm a former fertility patient as well. I spent 10 years on this pregnancy loss and infertility roller coaster. In 2014, I suffered the tragic stillbirth of my daughter, Paloma, and that really just changed the trajectory of my life. Her death brought me to my knees. It was grief I could never imagine. And I really didn't know how I was going to survive it. And interesting enough to think that, after I lost her, we tried to conceive and we really ran into further issues. And I just couldn't believe it because I was so angry. And I thought, if God, universe, whomever you believe in, took away my daughter so painfully like that, then I felt like I deserved to have all the children I could possibly want. And I just couldn't believe that after suffering such a tragic loss that I was still struggling with this pain and this trauma. And yeah, this continued for close to a decade. We were able to conceive my daughter, Isabella, naturally about 2 years later after the death of my daughter. But then we wanted to grow our family. And at that point, I was 38. So, you know how the medical community likes to label us at that point. So I was up against high risk from our previous loss, geriatric, and of advanced maternal age. So I really felt like something was wrong with me, that I had waited too long, that I had chosen my career over my family. And I really had so much shame and guilt that I was carrying with me. After 3 subsequent miscarriages, my OB said, you know what, Karla, we can't do this anymore. You need to go into IVF. It's going to be easy. Trust me, it's going to be easy. And I believed him and I trusted him. And so we went into IVF, and 2 failed rounds, we decided that we couldn't continue. But those failed rounds should have been success because we had 23 embryos. And out of those 23 embryos, only 3 were genetically normal. We went and did the genetic testing. We went through every transfer and everything was perfect. The lining was what it needed to be. And first transfer failed, second transfer failed, third transfer failed. And then our doctor called us and said, you need a surrogate. And then it was at that moment that I knew that we couldn't stretch ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally any longer. I knew we couldn't keep forcing this when it wasn't going to work. And really at the end of that journey is when I really stepped into my healing, and it led me down a path of healing and empowerment. And I wouldn't have done it unless I had come up against that concrete wall. So I'm grateful for everything that I've been through, because it's brought me to this place here where I'm wanting to help women who are walking that path feel less alone and feel supported. I think of it kind of as that Brene Brown quote, which is, you know, one day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide. I always think about that, you know, because when I was going through that process, I felt so alone, so isolated. And it wasn't that I didn't have people that loved me and supported me, but it's just I didn't have anyone to really understand what I was feeling. And I felt really, really, really alone. And I felt abandoned by the medical community as well. And so it was a lot of piecing together of different work, of different healing. But I'm happy to say now that I have 2 rainbow babies, Isabella, who's 8, and Leo, who's 2. And so I'm just so grateful to be here and to be sharing my story, because I think a lot of us sharing our stories, really bringing, you know, words and stories like this to the unspoken. There's so much stigma surrounding this still. And I think that there's so much work to be done, like we were talking about.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Karla. I'm so sorry for your losses. It is the most unimaginable pain. I feel like can I go back to the end of your IVF journey? Because there's some very important things that happened after that. So you were stuck in this place of IVF not being an option, being told that surrogacy was your only option, which is not an option for most people. But then you did some amazing things, some amazing inner work, and you ended up falling pregnant naturally after all of that. Is that right?
Yeah, about 4 months afterwards.
Wow.
It was, I like to think of it as an experiment with destiny. You know, I intuitively, I knew that when I walked into that clinic in New York City, I felt energetically that it wasn't for me. But I was listening to everybody else besides myself and my own inner knowing and my own intuition, because that's what I had been conditioned to do. You know, I think as women, I don't know how to really say it, but I mean, in terms of like how I was feeling, I felt like something was wrong with me and my body was broken. I needed to give it to somebody else to fix me when I really needed to address what I knew was holding me back, which was the pain and the trauma of my stillbirth and the miscarriages that subsequently followed. I knew intuitively and in my heart that was what was holding me back. And I needed to start there. And that's where I started.
That's incredible. I think so many people can relate to that feeling of, I'm broken. What's wrong with me? I need to be fixed. I'm going to hand over my body to these professionals who have the answers. And then the crushing shame and disappointment that comes along with that not working is really hard to navigate. And you touched on this idea of just knowing energetically that it wasn't for you, that being in that clinic, that wasn't the right path for you. And I love to speak to my students about this idea of intuition and how we can listen to that inner knowing a little bit more. And I think that it gets drowned out by so much noise and everything from social media to experts in this, that, and the other telling you what the right thing to do is, all the way to these incredible doctors who have decades of experience telling us what they think the right path is. How can we cut out all of that noise and listen to our own inner guidance?
Yeah. I think it's so difficult because, I'd love to say that I stepped into my own power and I started listening to my intuition a long time ago, but it really took my RE telling me that you need a surrogate and knowing that we just couldn't stretch ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally, or financially any longer. So, it was stepping into the unknown. It was learning to trust and maybe not. It was unlearning really to trust everyone that I was told to trust and learning to trust myself, because at the end of the day, this was my life. This was my body. And I had to do the work and find my way back to my body, embodying what I was feeling. And it's really a daily practice, really. It's a daily practice of self-awareness and self-compassion, knowing that I'm not perfect. I don't know all the answers. One day I'm going to feel wonderful and strong. And the other day I'm going to feel like shit and want to hide away from the world. And knowing that I'm going to be okay, that no matter what happens, I trust myself to make the best decisions for myself. But tuning everyone out is very, very, very hard. And I realized that so many things were out of my control. But the two things that I could control were my why. Why did I want to be a mom? Why did I want to continue on this journey? It was because I wanted to be a mother more than anything in the world. Anything. And when we had Isabella, I wanted to give her a sibling more than anything in the world. And so that was my why. And my worth. I was worthy. Nothing was wrong with me. I'm not off the fertility cliff at 41, because that's
Really?
when I can my, yes. And, despite what I was being told and despite what kind of label I was giving, I was worthy of the life that I had always imagined for myself. And I wasn't going to stop until I got there, until I felt like I was ready to stop. I think we all know when where the journey is over, and I think about that as well when I lost my daughter, and going through grief and everything, and talking about just about losing my daughter, that grieving it's so painful, and you really feel very alone in your grief as well. And I think that, it's hard for people to see you grieving. And so they want to kind of like rush that process on you.
Grief is such a beautiful emotion, isn't it? It's sort of bittersweet. It is this sort of, desperately unhappy place, but at the same time, it's beautiful because it can't exist without having that beautiful love connected to it. It's so hard.
Yeah. And I think, we want to always control the situation and rush things and be on our own timeline. I think that's also an important thing to talk about, is that I think we all feel like we're on this timeline, like we're running out of time. And that just simply isn't the case. We need to rest. We need to stop. We need to reset. We need to recalibrate, and we need to reconnect with our body. That's all very, very important.
Isn't that so true? How do you get into this space of, I'm sure so many people can relate to an IVF cycle not being successful, or even trying to conceive at home for many years and just being met with disappointment after disappointment. And I can't imagine, I never had enough embryos to test, but for you to have 3 perfect little embryos and to transfer all of them and have none of them be successful, how do you come back from that? Where do you even start? How do you get the hope and the motivation to keep going?
Yeah. I think for me, after the 3rd failed transfer, I felt a sense of relief that we weren't going to continue on this journey. Because like I mentioned earlier, I felt in my heart that it wasn't right for me. And so it was a sense of freedom to be kind of off that journey. But not continuing with IVF didn't mean that I gave up my hope of adding or giving Isabella a sibling. That continued in my heart. And so I did everything that I was taught that I shouldn't be doing, really. And I began to basically just take away the layers of defense, that I had basically built this armor around myself and my heart, trying to protect myself. And so I started small. I started with being aware and conscious of what I was thinking, my subconscious programming. I was so busy just trying to force an outcome that I never even had time to really think about how I was feeling. And there was so much stress and worry and pain and trauma, but I didn't even have any time to sit in that because I was just so busy moving on to the next thing. So when I finally stopped on this journey of IVF, I had a lot of time to think about what it is that I wanted and how I was going to approach this. And so I really started small by sitting in meditation. And meditation was very hard for me at first because I have this monkey brain, right? But I started small and I started to just, sit. And I started to think about all of the things that I had gratitude for. And I would make lists. And I would just sit there and think about all those things. And I would let, the feelings of sadness come in, or the feelings of guilt come in, or the feelings of shame. But then I would also focus on all the beautiful things that I had in my life. And I think you are also a Dr. Joe Dispenza fan, right? I'm
Indeed.
Yes. I love all of his teachings, and I really threw myself into all of his books, and I started to practice his mental movies and these visualizations. And it really just little by little began to change how I was beginning to feel. And then I would feel different, and then I would act different, and then I would think differently. And then all 3 of those things came together to embody this kind of new wave, this new frequency. And I was able to connect with what I wanted most in life. And I remember this sitting in meditation and having the same vision come every single time, and it was of this little boy, toddler phase. And it's kind of, still a little bit of wobbly on his feet. And it was always an image of a little boy, and me, still trying to control the situation, even in meditation, would say, Karla, stop, it's not going to be a boy, just be grateful for whatever you have, even in meditation, I would still be trying to control the situation. So I would have to literally reset and say, Karla, whatever it is that comes to your mind, accept it and embrace it and go with it. And it was always a little boy in this big, big field. And then it would, go to his wedding, and we're walking down the aisle. And, it's funny enough, about a year ago, my son was running through, the backyard, and I had this realization that holy shit, that was my vision come to life. This is how powerful we are, when we choose to focus our energy on what we really want as opposed to what we don't want. And I know that may sound so easy, but it starts by small little practices, and you build up and you build up, and you realize that you begin to change energetically, and then you feel better and you're able to connect with things that you really want, and it's so important to understand that mind-body connection.
We discount how powerful the mind is. We really do. We think that it's all about trusting the medical process and doing everything perfectly, but it is phenomenal what your mind can achieve if you allow it. You touched on this idea of putting your attention somewhere and letting your energy kind of follow that. I think this is a really hard thing to do because so much of the time there's two problems with that. I find when people come up against it, it's, I'm spending so much time worrying about the future and what could go wrong and all of the negative things. And it's very hard to cut that out. And then at the same time, we think, okay, I've got to put my energy onto my vision for the future and what I really want to embody and what I want to bring into my life. And then when those negative thoughts come back, we beat ourselves up because we think we're manifesting all of the negative stuff, don't we? But I like to try and explain to people that you don't have to be positive and in this place of gratitude all the time for changes to be made in your life. Can you explain how that works for you? How do we get into that alignment of what we want without worrying about focusing on all of the bad stuff as well?
I think we come to a place of acceptance and a place of awareness. And we also show ourselves compassion, because it's not a game of being perfect or doing this perfectly right or, manifesting or visualizing perfectly. We're humans, and if you're on this journey, you've been through a lot of shit. So the fact that you're still putting one foot in front of the other, you need to give yourself credit for that. You need to give yourself credit. You are so courageous and so strong. And what you're going through is so unfair. And no matter what anyone says, it's never going to make sense. But this is the journey that you're on. And you have a choice. You can choose. And I know that it's really hard to choose. It's not positive thinking. It's understanding how your mind and body work together, the energy that you're giving off, the frequency, and how that affects what it is that you really want. All of that works together in unison. Your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, all of it is interconnected. And so I think, again, it's not about, we all want to be, we want to do it just right. And am I doing it perfect, or I screwed up? And no, it's okay. It's okay. It's the first step is awareness, understanding what it is that you're thinking. What are your self-limiting beliefs? Becoming aware of them, giving yourself grace, saying, okay, yeah, I'm thinking of that, probably because I've been thinking that since I was a little girl. Our subconscious programming, most of us aren't aware of all the things that we've been holding since we were children, generational trauma, our own personal trauma. So it's really important just to start with self-awareness and then giving yourself compassion. You can reset. You have this bad thought, you acknowledge it, you feel it, right? Because feeling it is super important. You have to feel it to heal it, right? I know it sounds so trite, but it's so important. You need to feel it. You need to let those emotions run through your body, and then you need to find a way to release it. And so then you can reset, and then, try and encourage yourself and your mind to think of something more positive or something more encouraging or more empowering.
How can these unconscious blocks, all these sort of energetic blocks, get in the way of helping us find what we want in life? How can they get in the way of helping us get pregnant?
Well, I think for me personally, I'll speak of my journey. I had so much trauma in my second chakras. That's where our reproductive organs are. That's our center of creativity, our center of life. And I think these pains, trauma cause blockages, and they don't let the energy to flow easily or freely. So I think also a lot of the anger that I was holding on, I think that really impeded my ability to get pregnant as well. Energetically, I was very angry, very mad, very resentful. And I didn't know how, I didn't even understand that those feelings, those emotions were affecting my body. I had no idea until I started understanding how everything is connected. And so through healing modalities like breath work, which I found, on the latter part of my journey, just so transformational, and Reiki, to be healing modalities to really help you address those issues, right? Because I just feel like we're all energy, we're all frequency. And so having that energy flow, being in a state of calm and peace and in a state of rest as well, are ultimately so important for your ability to conceive a child.
It's choice, isn't it? There's no way to stop these thoughts coming up, the negative thoughts. This isn't going to work. I'm never going to be a mother. Why is this so hard? Why is this happening to me? There's no way to stop all of that coming up, is there? But it is just about acknowledging those thoughts, recognizing where they show up in your body, just allowing that. Like you said, it does sound a bit cheesy, but you can't heal these things until you feel them. I feel like this leads you into your ability to surrender. And I did an episode about surrendering recently, because no one wants to surrender into fertility challenges or loss or recurrent loss. How do you get into a place? How did you get into a place of surrender, and how do you help the women that you work with get to there as well?
Yeah, it's so hard. I think it's the hardest part of it, right? Because letting go, what does that even mean? I've done yoga for so long. I used to surf, and I've been doing yoga for 15 years, and surrender, 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 surrender into that pose, surrender. And I would always be like, what the are they talking about? But it's been the most important lesson of my life, that we're not in control of everything, no matter how much we want to be in control. And when we learn to not force and to step into that feminine energy and to let go and trust that the universe or God, whoever you believe in, will support you, will catch you, it's really, really changed my life, really. And I love to use this Buddhist proverb that a friend of mine told me, which is let go or be dragged. And for me, it finally just clicked in my mind, because for so long, I felt like I was being dragged on this journey, and I could barely keep my head above water, being dragged through all of the pain, all of the trauma, all of the doctor's appointments, all of those blood draws, all of those failed transfers, all of that money lost that I'll never recover, all to come out empty-handed. I was being dragged, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to keep going like this. So something had to change. And when I let go, I set myself free. I really did. I set myself free to open my mind and open my heart to something else, to something new, to something different that I had never done before, and it led me down this path of healing and empowerment. And it brought me my mom likes to call him my miracle baby, but I say he's my magic baby, because I know that I had a part in that. I know what I did. I know what changed, where that light bulb went on, and what healing modalities I put into practice. It was never perfect. It still isn't. I'm still on this healing journey. This is never going to stop for me. It will continue, until the day that I die. Because I want to keep learning. I want to keep living in the present moment and living in gratitude and loving and living in gratitude for everything that I have in my life, everything that I've been through, and loving my little two babies that I have now.
That's a really good point, isn't it? Do you feel like you need to be fully healed from your trauma and your experiences before you can continue on the journey of trying to build your family?
Never. No. I'll never fully be healed. I was laying in bed with my son the other night. It was National Rainbow Day, and I was laying in bed with him, cuddling him, and I just couldn't help but have this pain in my heart. Now 10 years later, it feels different, but it's never going to go away. It will always be there. There will always be an empty space in my heart for my daughter, and for everything that we should have had together that we'll never have an opportunity to have in this lifetime. So no, I do not think, your grief will ever go away, because that grief means you loved so deeply and so strongly. And so you can hold your grief while continuing on this journey, and that's what I did. I let her be this light for me. And it's been beautiful to see how our relationship, has really been brought to light in different ways. Connecting with her, in different ways has really brought me a lot of joy and a lot of solace. And to know that she is here, she is with us, she is ever present, and that she's really been guiding me. And so the grief will never go away, but it's something that you can walk hand in hand with. I always think of grief as, you got to just pull up a seat for her at the table. She's there, sometimes she's, quiet, not a day she's raging, but, you befriend her, because she will be with you. If you had loss like that, that's never going to change.
Oh, I have such a physical reaction to hearing you say that. It's so true. So, so true. I feel like this healing journey is never about forgetting or moving on. Never. It's about learning to live with what you've been through, and at some point getting to that space where it doesn't affect your whole day. You can be there with your experiences and your trauma and your grief, but it doesn't take over your entire life anymore. And that isn't an easy place to get to. Oof. How do you think that pregnancy loss changed you and this whole journey? You have been on such a journey, Karla, and not just from the loss of your beautiful daughter, but from everything else that you went through. How has this changed you as a person?
I think it's changed me in so many beautiful ways. I mean, it's certainly not what I had imagined for myself, but it's still so beautiful. I am undoubtedly a better mother to my two children who are earthside. Absolutely. I am more present. I am more patient. I am more conscious. I live in gratitude a lot. She has changed me in such a powerful way. I mean, she brought me the biggest pain I've ever felt. There were times, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't think that I would survive it, or there are many, many times I never thought I would be a mother, and living with that fear of the unknown was devastating for so long. But now, looking back on my journey, sometimes it feels unreal. Like, I can't believe that happened to me, that I went through that, and that I'm here, sharing my story in hopes that it might bring some solace or support to someone out there who finds themselves on this devastating journey. And so I'm really just really firmly rooted in what I'm doing now, helping women. And, I know that she is guiding me and guiding my work. And I'm just really, really grateful to be here, where I am now.
What would you say to yourself of 10 years ago, 8 years ago, or to anyone else who is on this journey at the moment?
I would say that you are so much more powerful than you could have ever imagined. And that I know that it feels like you are broken right now, or that you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you'll get there. And more importantly, you don't have to do this alone. There's many, many people out there who will support you through this process and hold your hand. Jen has a beautiful practice. I would love to support anyone on this journey who needs that safe space, but you don't have to do it alone, and that you are worthy of the life that you've always imagined for yourself.
Such beautiful words, Karla. all the feels with this conversation. So much. You have such an incredible story, and it is obviously lovely that your story had a happy ending, but I don't think that we should discount what we've been through because we ended up with a family. And it's really hard to look back and say, look, would I be okay with what happened if I didn't end up with my family? And that's a really hard thing I think about quite often. You know, I feel like I've healed, certainly not all of it, but a lot of what I went through. But I think it's really helped because I have ended up with the family that I dreamed about.
Yeah.
But when you're in the midst of it, when you are still struggling, it is so impossible to see that light at the end of the tunnel and the fear of the unknown, as you said.
Yeah.
So I hope that this conversation has been able to just offer a little bit of that light, the support that perhaps some women need. And gosh, what you said, just to know how powerful you are is one of the biggest gifts that you can give yourself. And when I realized that, my whole world changed. So thank you for everything that you have shared. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with before we start to wrap this up?
No, I think you summed it up beautifully. And I just want to reiterate really that, you do have the power to heal, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel and you are not alone.
Thank you. Karla, where can people find out more about you or get in contact with you if they want to learn more about the beautiful work that you do?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn at Karla, Karla Levit. I'm also on Instagram with my name, first name and last name. And my website is karla.levit.
Amazing. Thank you. And I will put a link to all of those in the show notes. Thank you so, so much for your time and for being here. I'm just going to walk around for the rest of this day with their big shining heart, I think, from listening to all of the beautiful words that you've said. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much, Dad, for having me.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this conversation with Karla. I hope that you could just feel this beautiful energy that she has from her words. Oh gosh, just, considering everything that she's been through, her ability to speak so positively and so beautifully about her journey is really inspiring. So I hope that you found this conversation helpful. And if you have any questions or any feedback, please let me know. Please reach out. I always love hearing what you think about the different guests and the different topics that we have. Now, next week on the podcast, we are talking about coping mechanisms on the fertility journey and the little things that you can do each day to make your life easier. We're going to explore this beautiful term called the window of tolerance, which is something that you need to hear if you feel like you're on your own path of healing within this journey. So until then, I can't wait to have you back. But in the meantime, I'm sending you all my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.